The narrative unfolds in the year 1840, nestled within the quiet, fog-laden expanse of rural England, where a small village clings to the traditions of an era poised on the edge of transformation. It is here, amid winding dirt paths and the low hum of everyday toil, that the story of Thomas Gray begins, a young orphan whose existence became entwined with whispers from realms unseen. The village, a patchwork of timber-framed cottages and moss-covered stone walls, bore witness to a peculiar phenomenon that would ripple through its collective memory for decades to come. Thomas Gray was no ordinary child. His figure, slight and often hunched beneath the weight of a worn woolen coat, moved silently through the narrow lanes and shadowed churchyards. At first glance, he seemed simply a boy marked by circumstance, an orphan left to the care of distant relatives and the village's indifferent charity. Yet, beneath this veneer of ordinariness lay an uncanny sensitivity, a whispered rumor among the villagers that Thomas could hear what others could not: the breath of the dead. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. The origins of this reputation were as elusive as the mists that curled through the village at dawn. Mothers would hush their children with tales of Thomas's strange gift, cautioning them against wandering near the old graveyard, where the boy was often seen standing motionless, eyes closed, as if listening to a secret melody carried on the wind. The local blacksmith, a man hardened by iron and flame, swore he once heard Thomas speaking to a shadowed figure beneath the ancient yew tree, though no one else was present. These murmurs grew into a tapestry of superstition and awe, weaving Thomas Gray into the very fabric of the village's folklore. The whispers reached beyond the boundaries of mere gossip. Villagers recounted nights when Thomas, sitting by the hearth in the dim glow of candlelight, would suddenly become rigid, his gaze fixed on some unseen presence. His breath would quicken, and he would murmur names long forgotten, names that belonged to those recently departed. Some believed these utterances were echoes from the other side, messages carried on the ethereal breath of the dead. Others, less convinced, dismissed them as the fanciful imaginings of a lonely child seeking attention. The atmosphere surrounding Thomas was one of mounting mystery and unease. The villagers, steeped in Christian doctrine, yet deeply rooted in older pagan traditions, found themselves caught between fear and fascination. In these rural enclaves of 1840 England, where the boundary between the living and the dead was both feared and revered, Thomas's ability challenged their understanding of life's fragile veil. His presence at funerals, standing silently apart yet attentive, became a source of both comfort and dread. People whispered that the boy could sense the restless spirits, hear their final breaths as they slipped from the mortal coil, and perhaps even commune with them in a way that defied mortal comprehension. This tale of Thomas Gray gained renewed vigor during a particularly harsh winter, when the village suffered a spate of sudden deaths. Neighbors who had once regarded the boy with wary eyes now sought his presence, hoping that his peculiar gift might offer solace or answers to the grief that shadowed their homes. It was said that on cold, moonless nights, Thomas would walk the frozen lanes, stopping at graves freshly turned, listening intently, as if the very earth whispered secrets to him. His uncanny ability to hear the dead breathing became both a beacon and a burden, isolating him from his peers while drawing the attention of those desperate for hope beyond the tangible world. Yet, no written records from the time provide a clear explanation for this phenomenon. The boy himself remained largely silent about his experiences, choosing instead to retreat into a world known only to him. Villagers' accounts, passed down through generations by word of mouth, paint a portrait of a child caught between two worlds, one foot in the realm of the living, the other brushing against the intangible whispers of the departed. The story of Thomas Gray's gift did not exist in a vacuum, but rather within the broader context of 19th century England, where the supernatural was both a source of fear and fascination. Tales of hauntings, spirit communication, and ghostly apparitions were common currency in village inns and hearthside conversations. The early Victorian era, while marked by scientific inquiry and progress, still grappled with the mysteries of death and what might lie beyond. In this milieu, Thomas's ability was simultaneously a cause for suspicion and a source of wonder, embodying the tension between emerging rationalism and enduring spiritual belief. This introduction to Thomas Gray's world sets the stage for a deeper exploration of a boy whose life was shadowed by the breath of those long gone. His story, whispered across centuries, invites us to peer into the delicate interplay between the living and the dead, the known and the unknowable. It is a tale that beckons with the promise of uncovering truths hidden in the spaces between silence and sound, the seen and unseen, a narrative that challenges the boundaries of perception and the very nature of existence itself. The year 1840 placed Thomas Gray within a complex tapestry of rural English life, where the early Victorian era was beginning to reshape society, even as age-old beliefs clung stubbornly to the hearts and minds of its inhabitants. To understand the profound impact of Thomas's story, one must first grasp the historical and cultural context of the time, a period marked by paradox and transition, where science and superstition engaged in a subtle, often uneasy dance. Rural England in 1840 was a world apart from the burgeoning industrial cities. The village where Thomas lived was typical of countless others scattered across the countryside. Small, insular communities, bound together by tradition, faith, and a shared understanding of life's rhythms, dictated by the land and the seasons. The local economy revolved around agriculture, with most villagers engaged in farming or crafts, passed down through generations. Education was rudimentary, and access to scientific knowledge limited, especially outside the towns and universities. Here, the familiar mingled with the mysterious, and the supernatural was woven into the fabric of daily existence. In this environment, death was not a distant concept, but an ever-present reality. Infant mortality was high. Diseases such as tuberculosis and cholera claimed lives indiscriminately, and life expectancy remained low by modern standards. Death was an intimate affair, witnessed and ritualized within the community. The churchyard was both a sacred resting place and a potent symbol of the thin veil separating the living from the dead. The villagers' attitudes towards death were shaped by a mixture of Christian doctrine and residual pagan beliefs, creating a cultural landscape where spirits, ghosts, and the afterlife were subjects of serious consideration rather than mere superstition. Victorian England was simultaneously entering an age of scientific discovery and expanding empirical knowledge. The Industrial Revolution was transforming urban centers, bringing innovations in medicine, technology, and communication. Yet in rural pockets like Thomas's village, these advances had yet to permeate deeply. The populace maintained a strong oral tradition, relying on folklore, storytelling, and communal memory to explain the unknown. Tales of hauntings and spectral visitations were common, serving both as cautionary legends and as expressions of collective anxieties about mortality and the afterlife. Amid this milieu, spiritualism and the fascination with the supernatural began to gain traction, particularly in urban and intellectual circles, but their roots extended into rural beliefs as well. The idea that the dead might communicate with the living was not merely fantasy. It was a subject of earnest debate and religious reflection. Clergy often preached about the soul's journey, the existence of angels and demons, and the possibility of divine intervention, while folk healers and mediums operated on the fringes of accepted practice. This cultural tension created fertile ground for stories such as that of Thomas Gray, whose alleged ability to hear the breath of the dead intersected with these widespread beliefs and fears. The social fabric of the time was also characterized by a rigid class structure and a strong emphasis on moral conduct, both of which influenced how unusual phenomena were received. An orphaned boy like Thomas occupied a precarious social position, often vulnerable to suspicion and marginalization. Yet, his supposed gift granted him a peculiar form of significance, elevating him beyond mere poverty and neglect to a figure of both reverence and trepidation. The community's response to Thomas's abilities reflected broader Victorian anxieties about the unknown and the boundaries of human experience. Religious attitudes played a central role in shaping perceptions of death and the supernatural. The Church of England, dominant in rural areas, preached a doctrine that emphasized the soul's salvation and the sanctity of the afterlife. Clergymen often sought to dispel superstitions, viewing them as vestiges of ignorance or potential threats to faith. However, they also recognized the emotional needs of their congregations, many of whom found comfort in the idea of lingering spirits or signs from beyond. This ambivalence created a delicate balance between skepticism and acceptance, with figures like local reverends acting as both spiritual guides and arbiters of acceptable belief. Folklore, meanwhile, provided a rich repository of symbols and narratives that informed villagers' understanding of death and the dead. Stories of restless spirits, protective ancestors, and the power of rituals to appease or banish ghosts were common. The breath of the dead, as an intangible and eerie phenomenon, resonated deeply within this tradition. Seen as a lingering essence, a sign of unfinished business, or a warning from beyond the grave. Such beliefs were not monolithic, but varied across regions and families, often blending Christian and pagan elements in ways that defied strict categorization. Thomas Gray's story thus emerged from a cultural crossroads where the rational and the mystical coexisted uneasily. His ability to hear the breath of the dead was not merely an isolated oddity, but a reflection of the era's broader struggle to reconcile faith, tradition, and the dawning light of scientific inquiry. While cities were beginning to embrace the promise of progress and reason, villages like Thomas's remained steeped in the enduring mysteries of life and death. The villagers' reactions to Thomas were shaped by these tensions. Some saw him as blessed or chosen, a conduit to the spiritual realm whose presence affirmed their beliefs. Others viewed him with suspicion, fearing that his gift might invite malevolent forces or disrupt the natural order. This ambivalence mirrored the larger societal debates of the time, where spiritualism was both embraced as a source of comfort and critiqued as superstition or charlatanism. Moreover, the early Victorian period was marked by a fascination with the occult and paranormal phenomena that would later crystallize into formal spiritualist movements. Seances, mediums, and attempts to contact the dead gained popularity among certain social circles, reflecting a widespread desire to understand and transcend mortality. Thomas's story, though rooted in a rural context, can be seen as a precursor to these developments, a personal and localized manifestation of a larger cultural impulse to bridge the divide between life and death. At the same time, scientific perspectives were beginning to challenge traditional explanations of death and the supernatural. Advances in medicine, psychology, and natural philosophy introduced new ways of interpreting sensory experiences and mental phenomena. However, these disciplines were in their infancy and often lacked the tools or frameworks to fully address experiences like Thomas's. This gap left room for multiple interpretations, from spiritual mediumship to psychological disturbance, allowing his story to occupy a liminal space where belief and skepticism coexisted. Within this historical framework, Thomas Gray's alleged gift can be appreciated not only as an individual anomaly, but as a cultural artifact emblematic of its time. His story encapsulates the early Victorian era's complex relationship with death, the afterlife, and the unknown, a relationship defined by both fear and hope, doubt and wonder. By situating Thomas within this rich historical and social context, we gain insight into how his extraordinary experience resonated with the people around him, and why it has endured as a haunting mystery that continues to captivate the imagination. Thus, the tale of the boy who could hear the dead breathing is inseparable from the world in which he lived, a world poised between the fading shadows of old beliefs and the first glimmers of modernity. Understanding this context is essential to unraveling the deeper significance of Thomas Gray's story and the enduring questions it raises about the human experience in the face of death and the unknown. Thomas Gray's early life was marked by hardship and isolation, circumstances that both shaped and obscured the origins of his extraordinary sensitivity. Born into poverty and orphaned at a young age, Thomas found himself thrust into the care of an austere orphanage on the village's outskirts, an institution more concerned with discipline than comfort. The walls of this bleak establishment echoed with the cries of children and the muted footsteps of caretakers, creating an atmosphere where loneliness and fear took root. From the earliest days in the orphanage, Thomas exhibited behaviors that set him apart from the other children. Caretakers recalled how he would often pause mid-play, his small frame stilling as if listening to some distant sound inaudible to others. Unlike his peers, who sought companionship and distraction, Thomas seemed drawn inward, his gaze often fixed on empty spaces where no visible presence existed. This withdrawal was initially attributed to shyness or the trauma of loss, but as time passed it became apparent that something more unusual was at play. One of the earliest accounts comes from Sister Margaret, a stern yet compassionate woman who oversaw the orphanage's daily operations. She noted that Thomas frequently claimed to hear whispers that no one else could perceive. At first, she dismissed these as fanciful imaginings, the product of a child's lonely mind. Yet, as Thomas began to recite names and phrases linked to recently deceased villagers, information he could not have known, Sister Margaret's skepticism wavered. She confided in Reverend Calloway, the local clergyman, about the boy's strange proclivities, marking the beginning of a cautious investigation into Thomas's abilities. Reverend Calloway, a man deeply rooted in faith but open to the mysteries of the spiritual realm, took a particular interest in Thomas. He visited the orphanage regularly, observing the boy's behavior with a mixture of curiosity and concern. The Reverend's accounts describe Thomas as possessing an uncanny stillness and attentiveness, as if attuned to a world beyond the senses. During one visit, Thomas reportedly whispered the name of a recently deceased villager before the news had reached the community, a revelation that unsettled the Reverend and lent credence to the boy's claims. Local clergy were not the only observers intrigued by Thomas's condition. Dr. Henry Whitfield, a physician serving the village and its environs, encountered Thomas during a routine health inspection of the orphanage. Whitfield, trained in the emerging medical sciences of the time, approached the boy's case with a clinical eye. He noted Thomas's heightened sensitivity to sounds and his occasional episodes of pallor and breathlessness, symptoms that suggested psychological or neurological factors. Yet, even Dr. Whitfield could not dismiss the boy's accurate recounting of events and names beyond his possible knowledge. The villagers themselves were divided in their perceptions of Thomas. Some regarded him as a blessed child, touched by divine grace and capable of bridging the gap between life and death. Others whispered fears of malevolent forces, viewing him as a harbinger of doom or a conduit for restless spirits. Children avoided him on the village green, while adults cast wary glances when Thomas passed by. This mixture of reverence and suspicion isolated the boy socially, deepening his solitude and perhaps intensifying his otherworldly attunement. Accounts from caretakers and clergy alike describe Thomas's demeanor as both gentle and haunted. He was known to wander the orphanage grounds at dusk, pausing near the ancient yew tree that stood sentinel over the village cemetery. There, witnesses claimed, he would close his eyes and place a hand to his chest, breathing slowly, as if matching the rhythm of an unseen presence. These moments were often followed by whispered murmurs, names, fragments of conversations, or pleas for help that left onlookers unsettled. The community's ambivalence extended to their treatment of Thomas. While some sought to protect him from harm and ridicule, others demanded that his strange behavior be suppressed. The orphanage's overseers, caught between compassion and propriety, struggled to balance the boy's needs with the expectations of the village elders. Thomas was sometimes reprimanded for speaking out of turn or for his withdrawn nature, yet his unique sensitivity was impossible to ignore. This tension between acceptance and alienation shaped much of Thomas's formative years. His interactions with others were limited, and he developed a quiet reserve that masked the intensity of his inner experiences. Diaries and letters from the time, preserved in local archives, hint at the boy's internal struggle. A yearning to connect with both the living and the dead, coupled with a profound sense of isolation. These documents reveal a child grappling with a gift that was as much a burden as it was a blessing. Thomas's early life was also marked by moments of compassion and empathy that transcended his social standing. Villagers recounted occasions when he comforted grieving families, speaking softly of their lost loved ones in ways that brought solace. His presence at funerals became almost ritualistic, a silent witness whose attentiveness was seen as a form of spiritual guardianship. These acts endeared him to some, even as they deepened the mystery surrounding his abilities. Despite these connections, Thomas remained an enigma. His claims were met with both awe and skepticism, reflecting the broader societal tensions of the era. The orphanage itself became a microcosm of this dynamic, part sanctuary, part prison, where Thomas's extraordinary sensitivity was both nurtured and constrained. The interplay of faith, science, and superstition that permeated the village found a poignant expression in the boy's life. As Thomas grew older, his reputation extended beyond the confines of the orphanage. Stories of his abilities spread to neighboring villages, drawing the attention of local dignitaries and curious travelers. Yet, detailed records of his experiences during this period are scarce, often filtered through the lens of oral tradition and fragmented accounts. What remains clear is that Thomas's early life laid the foundation for a phenomenon that would captivate and perplex those who encountered him. In examining Thomas Gray's upbringing and the early indications of his gift, one observes a confluence of personal history and cultural context. The orphanage, the village community, and the prevailing attitudes of the time all played roles in shaping how Thomas's sensitivity was understood and expressed. His story is not merely one of a boy with an unusual ability, but also a narrative about the intersection of vulnerability, belief, and the human desire to find meaning in the face of death. By piecing together testimonies from caretakers, clergy, and villagers, a portrait emerges of a child both gifted and burdened, a boy whose early life was marked by encounters with the unseen and whose presence challenged the boundaries of the known world. Thomas Gray's upbringing invites us to consider the ways in which environment, experience, and cultural belief intertwine to create the conditions for extraordinary phenomena, and how such phenomena, in turn, reflect the hopes and fears of the communities that witness them. On a bleak October night in 1840, the village was gripped by a chill that seemed to seep into the bones of every inhabitant. It was on this night that the first recorded incident involving Thomas Gray's uncanny ability unfolded, an event that would forever alter the community's perception of the boy and ignite a mixture of fear, curiosity, and awe that rippled through the village and beyond. The incident began with the sudden passing of Mr. Samuel Hargrove, a well-respected farmer, whose death came unexpectedly after a brief illness. News of his demise spread swiftly, casting a pall of sorrow over the village. As was customary, preparations for his burial commenced promptly, and villagers gathered to pay their respects. Among them was Thomas Gray, who, despite his youth and social standing, was drawn to the somber proceedings with an intensity that went beyond mere attendance. That evening, as darkness settled and the village lay draped in a heavy silence, Thomas approached the graveyard, a place he frequented with a solemn reverence. Accompanied by a small group of villagers, including the blacksmith John Fletcher and the innkeeper's wife, Mary Collins, Thomas ventured toward the freshly dug grave. The moon, obscured intermittently by drifting clouds, cast an uneven glow on the weathered tombstones, their inscriptions worn by time. Witnesses recalled that Thomas's demeanor was markedly different from usual. His steps were hesitant yet purposeful, his gaze fixed ahead, as if guided by an unseen force. Upon reaching the gravesite, the boy paused, closing his eyes and placing a trembling hand over his heart. A hush fell over the group as Thomas began to whisper, a low, rhythmic murmur that seemed to echo the very breath of the night itself. It was then that the villagers heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible sound, like the soft exhalation of someone struggling to breathe. The group fell silent, straining to catch the elusive noise. Mary Collins later described it as the whisper of a dying wind, gentle yet persistent, as if the earth itself were breathing. The sound seemed to emanate from the grave, a chilling accompaniment to Thomas's murmurs. Thomas opened his eyes and began to speak, recounting in a voice barely above a whisper the final moments of Mr. Hargrove's life. He spoke of labored breaths, a struggle for air, and a lingering presence that refused to depart. The villagers listened in stunned silence as he named details known only to those closest to the deceased, details that had not yet been shared publicly. The boy's words painted a vivid picture of the farmer's last hours, evoking a palpable sense of connection between the living and the dead. John Fletcher, a man of practical sensibilities, admitted his own unease. "I could scarce believe my ears," he confessed in a later interview, for Thomas spoke with such certainty, as though he had been present at the very moment of Mr. Hargrove's passing. The blacksmith's testimony, alongside that of other witnesses, lent weight to the extraordinary nature of the event and challenged conventional explanations. As the night deepened, Thomas remained at the gravesite, his presence a silent vigil that seemed to bridge two worlds. His whispered words continued, shifting from description to supplication, as if offering comfort to the restless spirit. Those present reported a profound sense of calm settling over the group, a momentary reprieve from grief and fear, tinged with a fragile hope that the departed might find peace through the boy's intervention. The incident did not go unnoticed by the village authorities. Reverend James Calloway, already intrigued by Thomas's abilities, arrived at the graveyard the following day to investigate. His journal entries provide a detailed account of the event, noting the villagers' testimonies and his own observations. The Reverend described Thomas's behavior as both unsettling and miraculous, acknowledging the difficulty in reconciling such phenomena with orthodox belief. Reverend Calloway's involvement marked the beginning of formal inquiries into Thomas's claims. He arranged for vigils to be held at the graveyard, intending to observe the boy's abilities under controlled conditions. These sessions, though limited in scope, produced further accounts of Thomas's sensitivity to the presence of the dead, reinforcing the initial incident's credibility. The villagers' reactions to the first recorded incident were complex and multifaceted. For some, Thomas became a figure of spiritual significance, a living medium through whom the dead could communicate. Others viewed the event with suspicion, concerned that it might herald misfortune or invite supernatural dangers. The incident intensified existing fears about the boundary between life and death, underscoring the fragile hold the living had on their understanding of mortality. In the days and weeks that followed, the story of Thomas's encounter at Mr. Hargrove's grave spread beyond the village. Visitors came seeking to witness the boy's abilities firsthand, and local newspapers began to report on the phenomenon, often with a mixture of skepticism and sensationalism. The village found itself thrust into an unwanted spotlight, grappling with the implications of Thomas's gift and the challenges it posed to social order and religious doctrine. The first recorded incident also sparked a renewed examination of death rituals and spiritual beliefs within the community. Debates arose over the appropriateness of Thomas's involvement in funerary practices, with some clergy expressing concern that his presence might disrupt sacred rites or encourage superstition. Conversely, others argued that his gift offered a form of solace to grieving families, bridging the chasm left by loss. Thomas himself remained enigmatic throughout this period. Witnesses described him as both composed and burdened, carrying the weight of his experiences with a maturity beyond his years. His accounts of hearing the breath of the dead were not mere repetitions, but conveyed a depth of emotion and understanding that suggested a profound connection to the spirits he claimed to perceive. The incident at the graveyard represents a pivotal moment in Thomas Gray's narrative, a tangible intersection of the living and the dead that challenged the boundaries of perception and belief. It serves as a catalyst for the unfolding drama that would engage villagers, clergy, and scholars alike, prompting questions that resonated far beyond the confines of the small English village. By examining this event in detail, we gain insight into the complexities of human responses to the supernatural and the ways in which extraordinary experiences can alter communal dynamics. The night at Mr. Hargrove's graveyard stands as a testament to the enduring mystery of death and the fragile bridge that connects our world to the unseen. The growing notoriety of Thomas Gray's uncanny ability inevitably drew the attention of local authorities and the clergy, who found themselves grappling with the implications of a boy who claimed to hear the breath of the dead. At the forefront of this inquiry were Reverend James Calloway and Dr. Henry Whitfield, two men whose differing worldviews would shape the investigation in profound ways. Reverend Calloway, a man of deep faith and respected standing within the village, approached Thomas's claims with a mixture of hope and caution. To him, the boy's gift represented a possible manifestation of divine grace, a spiritual bridge between the living and the departed. Calloway believed that the ability to perceive the breath of the dead might be a form of mediumship, a conduit through which restless souls sought comfort or redemption. However, as a guardian of orthodox belief, he was also wary of deception or interference by malevolent forces. His role was to discern truth from trickery and to protect his flock from spiritual harm. Dr. Henry Whitfield, in contrast, brought a burgeoning scientific perspective to the case. As the village physician, he was trained in the empirical methods emerging from the wider medical community and sought natural explanations for Thomas's phenomena. Whitfield considered the possibility that the boy's sensitivity could be linked to psychological trauma, perhaps a response to grief or the isolation of orphanhood. Auditory hallucinations, he reasoned, were not uncommon in cases of extreme stress or mental illness. Nonetheless, Whitfield acknowledged that Thomas's accurate knowledge of private details complicated a purely clinical interpretation. Together, Calloway and Whitfield devised a series of methods to test Thomas's purported abilities, seeking to balance spiritual discernment with scientific rigor. Reverend Calloway organized vigils at the village graveyard, inviting Thomas to participate, while other villagers observed and recorded the events. These nocturnal gatherings aimed to monitor the boy's interactions with the unseen, verifying whether his claims could withstand scrutiny. Meanwhile, Dr. Whitfield conducted medical examinations, observing Thomas's physical and mental state, searching for signs of illness or deception. During one such vigil, held beneath the gnarled branches of the ancient yew tree, Thomas was invited to stand before the assembled witnesses. The night was thick with mist, the air heavy with anticipation. Villagers and clergy alike waited in silence as Thomas closed his eyes, his breath steadying as if attuned to an imperceptible rhythm. Moments later, he began to whisper names and descriptions that matched those of recently deceased individuals, some of whom were unknown to many present. The accuracy of his statements astonished observers and lent credence to the notion that his gift was genuine. However, not all were convinced. Some villagers accused Thomas of having prior knowledge, suggesting that he gleaned information through gossip or subtle questioning. Others speculated that the boy might be exaggerating or fabricating his experiences for attention. Reverend Calloway, ever cautious, acknowledged these doubts, but maintained a degree of faith in Thomas's sincerity. He cautioned against dismissing the phenomenon outright, urging the community to consider the possibility of divine mystery at work. Dr. Whitfield's medical assessments revealed no physical ailments that could explain Thomas's sensitivity. The boy was in robust health, his nervous system apparently intact. Yet, psychological explanations remained plausible. Whitfield proposed that Thomas's experiences might be a form of heightened perception born from emotional trauma, or a coping mechanism for isolation. He documented episodes where Thomas appeared anxious or fatigued following intense interactions with the dead, suggesting that the boy's gift came at a personal cost. The tension between faith and science became a central theme in the investigation. Reverend Calloway and Dr. Whitfield, though often at odds, maintained a respectful dialogue, recognizing the limitations of their respective approaches. Their correspondence reveals a shared desire to understand Thomas's condition without condemning or exploiting him. This delicate balance reflected broader societal debates in early Victorian England, where traditional beliefs coexisted uneasily with emerging scientific rationalism. The investigation also highlighted the complexities of community dynamics. Villagers were divided between those who embraced Thomas as a spiritual intermediary and those who feared the implications of his abilities. Some families sought his presence during times of grief, hoping that he might provide messages from lost loved ones. Others avoided him, wary of superstition or potential disruption to social order. This ambivalence underscored the challenges faced by both clergy and medical professionals in navigating the intersection of belief, mental health, and communal cohesion. Throughout the inquiry, Thomas remained remarkably composed, his demeanor reflecting a mixture of innocence and burdened wisdom. He spoke little of his own motivations, offering few explanations for his experiences. However, occasional glimpses into his inner world emerged through conversations documented by Reverend Calloway. Thomas described the breath he heard not merely as sound, but as a form of emotion, a lingering imprint of life's final moments. He spoke of these breaths carrying memories and feelings, connecting him to the essence of the departed in ways that transcended ordinary understanding. This nuanced description challenged simplistic interpretations of Thomas's sensitivity. It suggested a depth of perception that was as much spiritual as sensory, inviting contemplation of the boundaries between life and death, mind and spirit. The boy's intimate connection to the breath of the dead became a focal point for both reverence and scientific curiosity, embodying the era's struggle to reconcile tangible evidence with the ineffable. The local authorities' involvement marked a turning point in Thomas Gray's story. Their efforts to investigate and verify his abilities lent a measure of legitimacy to the phenomenon, even as doubts persisted. The collaboration between Reverend Calloway and Dr. Whitfield exemplified the era's complex negotiation between faith and reason, highlighting the challenges of addressing experiences that defied easy categorization. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Thomas's gift was not merely a private matter, but a communal concern, touching on fundamental questions of mortality, belief, and the human desire for connection beyond death. The methods employed, vigils, medical examinations, and community testimonies, reflected an earnest attempt to bridge divides and seek understanding in a world poised between tradition and modernity. This phase of inquiry set the stage for the continuing exploration of Thomas Gray's extraordinary sensitivity. It illuminated both the possibilities and limitations of contemporary approaches to the supernatural, revealing a community grappling with the unknown and a boy caught at the nexus of competing worldviews. The investigation by local authorities and clergy thus stands as a pivotal chapter in the unfolding mystery of the boy who could hear the dead breathing. The phenomenon surrounding Thomas Gray's ability to hear the breath of the dead sparked a wealth of theories and speculations, each attempting to unravel the mystery through lenses informed by faith, science, and folklore. The early Victorian era, with its evolving intellectual landscape, provided fertile ground for diverse interpretations that reflected the era's complex relationship with the supernatural. Reverend James Calloway, deeply entrenched in his religious convictions, proposed the spiritual mediumship theory. To him, Thomas was a vessel chosen by divine providence to serve as an intermediary between the living and the dead. Calloway believed that the boy's sensitivity was a sacred gift, enabling him to perceive the lingering presence of souls unable to find rest. This interpretation aligned with Christian notions of the afterlife and the existence of spirits, framing Thomas's ability as both a blessing and a responsibility. The Reverend's view was not without caution. He warned of the dangers of spiritual deception and emphasized the need for discernment, underscoring the tension between faith and fear. In contrast, Dr. Henry Whitfield approached Thomas's experiences through the emerging framework of medical science. He posited that the boy's auditory perceptions might be the result of psychological trauma and auditory hallucinations. Whitfield suggested that the isolation and grief Thomas endured as an orphan could have precipitated a heightened state of sensory sensitivity or dissociation. Such conditions, he argued, were not uncommon and could produce vivid, involuntary experiences that felt as real as external stimuli. While this explanation grounded Thomas's phenomena in natural causes, Whitfield acknowledged the challenge posed by the accuracy of the boy's knowledge, leaving aspects of the case unresolved within a purely clinical model. Local folklore experts and villagers offered a third perspective, rooted in the oral traditions and superstitions of rural England. They viewed Thomas's sensitivity as an early manifestation of paranormal aptitude, a gift that allowed him to traverse the boundary between the physical world and the spirit realm. This theory embraced the idea of second sight, a concept prevalent in British and Celtic folklore, wherein certain individuals possessed innate abilities to perceive supernatural phenomena. According to this view, Thomas was a seer or sensitive, endowed with a rare connection to the dead that transcended ordinary human faculties. Folklore framed his experiences as part of a continuum of ancestral wisdom, blending pagan and Christian elements in a syncretic belief system. Each of these theories, while compelling in its own right, revealed inherent limitations when applied to Thomas's case. Reverend Calloway's spiritual interpretation grappled with the challenge of distinguishing genuine divine gifts from potential trickery or psychological disturbance. His insistence on caution reflected the broader religious community's wariness of unregulated spiritual phenomena which could threaten doctrinal authority or incite fear. The Reverend's position highlighted the delicate balance between embracing the miraculous and guarding against heresy. Dr. Whitfield's medical explanation, though grounded in rational inquiry, struggled to account for the boy's detailed and verifiable knowledge of private matters. The accuracy of Thomas's accounts defied simple categorization as hallucination or delusion, prompting questions about the limits of contemporary psychological understanding. Whitfield's theory also faced the challenge of integrating subjective spiritual experiences within an empirical framework that was still in its infancy regarding mental health and sensory perception. Folklore-based interpretations, while culturally resonant, often lacked systematic rigor. They relied heavily on anecdotal evidence and symbolic narratives, making it difficult to assess the veracity of claims or to separate tradition from embellishment. Moreover, the blending of pagan and Christian motifs in these beliefs sometimes created tension with official religious doctrines, complicating acceptance within the community. The coexistence of these competing theories underscored the broader societal tensions of early Victorian England, a period marked by rapid scientific progress alongside persistent spiritual and superstitious beliefs. The intellectual climate was one of negotiation, where emerging paradigms challenged established worldviews without wholly displacing them. Thomas Gray's case became a focal point for this dialogue, embodying the era's struggle to reconcile faith, reason, and the mysteries of human experience. Community reactions further complicated the landscape of interpretation. Some villagers embraced the spiritual mediumship theory, viewing Thomas as a beacon of hope and a reassurance that death was not an absolute end. His ability offered comfort to grieving families and reinforced a shared belief in an afterlife. Others, influenced by medical skepticism or fear of the unknown, leaned toward psychological explanations, wary of attributing supernatural significance to what they considered natural phenomena. The tension between these perspectives often manifested in social interactions, shaping attitudes toward Thomas and his family. Supporters defended the boy's gift as authentic and sacred, while detractors warned against indulgence in superstition. This dynamic reflected a community navigating the uncertainties of change, caught between tradition and modernity. Beyond the village, Thomas's story entered the broader discourse on the paranormal and mental health, influencing early spiritualist movements and psychological inquiry. His case was cited in discussions about the nature of mediumship, the credibility of spirit communication, and the psychological mechanisms underlying extraordinary experiences. Scholars and practitioners debated whether Thomas represented a genuine connection to the spirit world or a psychological anomaly, contributing to evolving definitions of normalcy and pathology. The limitations and contradictions inherent in these theories also prompted reflection on the nature of evidence and belief. Thomas's experiences challenged the binary opposition between the natural and supernatural, suggesting that human perception might encompass dimensions not fully understood by contemporary knowledge. His story invited a reconsideration of the boundaries of reality, encouraging openness to phenomena that eluded easy classification. In this context, the exploration of Thomas Gray's abilities became more than a local curiosity. It emerged as a case study in the complexities of human consciousness and the cultural frameworks used to interpret it. The theories proposed in 1840 laid the groundwork for ongoing debates about the interplay between mind, spirit, and society, debates that continue to resonate in modern explorations of paranormal and psychological phenomena. By examining the diverse explanations offered for Thomas's gift, we gain insight into the multifaceted ways in which human beings seek to understand the unknown. His story exemplifies the challenges of interpreting experiences that straddle the threshold of the explainable, revealing how cultural, religious, and scientific narratives converge and diverge in the quest for meaning. Ultimately, the theories surrounding Thomas Gray highlight the enduring tension between skepticism and belief, reason and wonder, that defines the human encounter with mystery. Unearthed from the faded archives of the village church and the modest orphanage where he spent his early years, Thomas Gray's diary entries offer a rare and intimate glimpse into the boy's inner world, his reflections, fears, and the profound burden of a gift that set him apart from those around him. These personal writings, penned in a careful hand, despite the scarcity of formal education afforded to an orphan of his station, reveal dimensions of Thomas's experience that official records and third-party accounts could scarcely capture. Within the fragile pages, Thomas describes the breath he hears, not merely as a sound, but as a complex tapestry of emotion and memory, an echo of life's final moments imprinted upon the air. He writes of the breath as a living presence, sometimes warm and comforting, at other times ragged and filled with anguish. This breath, he confesses, carries more than the mere act of respiration. It holds the essence of the departed's last feelings, thoughts, and regrets. It is this intimate connection that both fascinates and terrifies him, shaping his perception of the world in ways that ordinary senses cannot comprehend. In one poignant entry, Thomas recounts an encounter with the spirit of a young woman who had died suddenly in childbirth. He describes how her breath was thin and trembling, laced with sorrow and a desperate longing for the child she left behind. Thomas writes that he felt compelled to remain by her side long after the funeral, whispering words of comfort in the hope of easing her passage. This moment, he admits, left him drained and vulnerable, illuminating the emotional toll exacted by his sensitivity. The diaries further reveal Thomas's struggle with isolation. Despite the occasional kindness of caretakers and villagers, he often felt alienated by his experiences. Friends were few, and the gulf between his inner reality and the perceptions of others widened with each passing day. He writes candidly about the loneliness that accompanied his gift, the weight of knowing secrets that others could not share, and the fear of being misunderstood or rejected. This isolation was compounded by the village's mixture of reverence and suspicion, leaving Thomas caught between worlds, neither fully embraced by the living nor at peace with the dead. Yet, beyond the burden, Thomas's writings convey a profound desire to help. He expresses a deep empathy for the restless spirits he perceives, viewing his gift as a calling rather than a curse. His diary entries detail moments when he felt able to soothe troubled souls, guiding them toward peace and, in doing so, providing comfort to the living. This sense of purpose imbued his life with meaning, even as it exacted a personal cost. The entries also touch upon moments of doubt and fear. Thomas grapples with questions about the nature of his ability, whether it is a divine blessing, a punishment, or an affliction. He wonders if the breath he hears is truly the essence of the dead or a trick of his mind. These reflections highlight the complexity of his experience, revealing a boy attempting to make sense of phenomena that defy conventional understanding. Moreover, the diaries provide glimpses into Thomas's interactions with key figures in the village. He mentions Reverend Calloway with a mixture of respect and apprehension, recognizing the clergyman's role in both supporting and scrutinizing him. Similarly, he writes of Dr. Whitfield, whose clinical demeanor contrasts with Thomas's spiritual sensitivity. These relationships underscore the tensions between faith, science, and personal experience that permeated his life. Thomas's confessions also reveal a heightened awareness of time and memory. He perceives the breath of the dead as a form of temporal echo, a residual imprint that lingers beyond physical death. This notion challenges linear conceptions of time, suggesting that moments of life may persist in subtle ways, accessible through extraordinary perception. His writings hint at an intuitive understanding of existence that transcends the limits of his age and circumstance. Notably, the diaries contain cryptic references to dreams and visions that accompanied his waking experiences. Thomas describes instances where the breath seemed to carry voices or images, moments when the boundary between the audible and the visual blurred. These episodes reveal an immersive sensory world that enveloped the boy, further separating him from his peers and deepening his connection to the unseen. The emotional landscape of the diaries is rich and multifaceted. Thomas's words convey sorrow, wonder, fear, and compassion in equal measure. They chart a journey of self-discovery and acceptance, chronicling the boy's efforts to reconcile his extraordinary gift with the demands of everyday life. His reflections invite readers to consider the profound impact of sensitivity to the supernatural on personal identity and social integration. In preserving these intimate testimonies, Thomas Gray's diaries serve as a vital complement to external accounts, providing a voice to the boy behind the legend. They humanize the mysterious figure who could hear the dead breathing, transforming him from a subject of speculation into a deeply felt individual whose experiences resonate across time. These writings also challenge modern readers to engage with the complexities of perception and belief. Thomas's descriptions of the breath as emotion and memory invite a reconsideration of how humans relate to death and the departed. His struggles with isolation and purpose echo universal themes of alienation and the search for meaning in the face of the unknown. By delving into Thomas's personal reflections, we gain a more nuanced understanding of the costs and gifts of extraordinary sensitivity. His diaries illuminate the intimate interplay between the self and the supernatural, revealing a boy who lived at the threshold of worlds and whose inner journey continues to inspire contemplation and inquiry. In this light, Thomas Gray emerges not merely as a figure of folklore or anomaly, but as a poignant testament to the enduring human quest to listen beyond silence, to hear the breath of what lies beyond, and to find connection amidst mystery. As the years passed, the tale of Thomas Gray transcended the boundaries of his small village, weaving itself into the broader fabric of Victorian society's fascination with the supernatural and the unexplained. The story of the boy who could hear the dead breathing found its way into newspapers, spiritualist circles, and local lore, inspiring both fear and intrigue far beyond its rural origins. In the decades following the first recorded incidents, accounts of Thomas's gift appeared sporadically in Victorian newspapers, often framed with a blend of sensationalism and cautious curiosity. Reporters and editors alike grappled with the challenge of presenting such a phenomenon to a public increasingly captivated by scientific progress, yet still enthralled by mysteries beyond the tangible. Articles varied in tone, from reverent portrayals of Thomas as a divinely touched medium to skeptical critiques dismissing his abilities as superstition or trickery. These publications amplified the legend, drawing attention to the boy's story and inviting readers to ponder the thin veil that separates life from death. Within spiritualist circles, which burgeoned in popularity during the mid to late 19th century, Thomas Gray's narrative became a touchstone for discussions about mediumship and communication with the departed. Practitioners and enthusiasts referenced his experiences as evidence of genuine psychic sensitivity, often citing his reported ability to hear the breath of the dead as a unique and compelling manifestation of spiritual connection. His story was shared in lectures, journals, and private gatherings, contributing to the growing body of cases that fueled the spiritualist movement's claims of an accessible afterlife. Simultaneously, attempts emerged to locate Thomas's final resting place and verify historical details surrounding his life. Researchers and enthusiasts undertook expeditions to the village cemetery, combing through burial records and local archives in hopes of uncovering tangible links to the boy's existence. While definitive identification of Thomas's grave proved elusive, owing to incomplete records and the passage of time, the quest itself underscored the enduring fascination with his story and the desire to connect with the tangible remnants of a figure who bridged the living and the dead. The legacy of Thomas Gray also permeated the collective memory of the village itself. Oral traditions passed down through generations preserved fragments of his story, blending fact and folklore in ways that both honored and mystified his life. Elders recounted tales of the boy's solitary vigils at the graveyard, his whispered conversations with unseen presences, and the aura of both comfort and unease that surrounded him. These narratives became part of the village's identity, shaping local customs and attitudes toward death and the supernatural. In the modern era, scholars and paranormal researchers have revisited Thomas Gray's story with renewed interest, seeking to contextualize his experiences within historical, psychological, and cultural frameworks. Academic studies have examined the social dynamics of the village, the interplay between faith and emerging scientific thought, and the psychological profiles of individuals exhibiting purported mediumistic abilities. These investigations aim to disentangle myth from reality, while acknowledging the profound impact of such narratives on community and belief systems. The boy's narrative has also been employed as a case study in the intersection of mental health and supernatural belief. Psychologists have explored the possibility that Thomas's sensitivity might reflect heightened perceptual awareness, dissociative states, or auditory phenomena linked to trauma. Conversely, anthropologists and theologians have emphasized the cultural significance of his experiences, highlighting how communal interpretations shape the expression and reception of extraordinary abilities. Public reaction to Thomas Gray's story has remained varied and complex. For some, his tale is a source of wonder and inspiration, a reminder of the mysteries that lie beyond empirical understanding. For others, it is a cautionary account of the dangers of superstition and the need for critical inquiry. Regardless of perspective, the story continues to provoke dialogue about the nature of reality, the limits of human perception, and the enduring human desire to connect with what lies beyond death. Annual commemorations have been observed by descendants of the village community and enthusiasts alike, gatherings that honor the memory of Thomas Gray and the enigmatic legacy he left behind. These events often include storytelling sessions, historical presentations, and discussions that explore the broader themes of death, memory, and the supernatural. Attendees share personal reflections and interpretations, weaving new threads into the ongoing tapestry of the boy's story. Visitors drawn by the legend report a range of experiences when engaging with sites associated with Thomas. Some describe sensations of calm or a heightened awareness of presence, while others recount inexplicable auditory or visual phenomena. These encounters contribute to the living nature of the story, transforming it from a static historical account into an evolving experience that continues to resonate in the present. The continued interest in Thomas Gray reflects a broader cultural engagement with historical mysteries and the supernatural. His story embodies the tensions and harmonies between skepticism and belief, science and spirituality, isolation and community. It invites exploration not only of a singular phenomenon, but also of the ways in which societies interpret and integrate experiences that challenge conventional understanding. Through newspapers, spiritualist discourse, scholarly research, and communal memory, Thomas Gray's narrative endures as a compelling testament to the human fascination with the unknown. It serves as a bridge across time, linking Victorian sensibilities to contemporary inquiries into the nature of consciousness and the afterlife. The boy who could hear the dead breathing remains a figure whose story invites us to listen closely to the whispers of history, the echoes of belief, and the breath of mysteries yet unresolved. The story of Thomas Gray did not remain confined to the realms of folklore and local legend. It became a subject of intense scrutiny and debate among historians, psychologists, and paranormal researchers, each bringing distinct perspectives to bear on the boy who could hear the dead breathing. This multifaceted engagement reflects the enduring complexity of his narrative and the challenge it poses to conventional categories of understanding. Historians approached Thomas's tale with a critical eye, seeking to situate it within the broader social and cultural context of 19th century England. They examined archival materials, including parish records, newspaper articles, and personal correspondences, to reconstruct the factual framework of his life and the community's response. For many historians, Thomas's story served as a window into Victorian attitudes toward death, spirituality, and childhood. It illuminated how communities navigated the tensions between emerging scientific rationalism and deeply entrenched supernatural beliefs. Some scholars cautioned against uncritical acceptance of anecdotal accounts, emphasizing the need to discern historical fact from embellishment or myth-making that often accompanies oral traditions. Psychologists, meanwhile, engaged with Thomas's experiences through the lens of mental health and sensory perception. They considered the possibility that his reported ability might be explained by conditions such as auditory hallucinations, heightened suggestibility, or trauma-induced dissociation. Thomas's upbringing as an orphan, marked by isolation and grief, provided a context for exploring how psychological factors could manifest as extraordinary sensory experiences. Contemporary studies of similar phenomena have highlighted the brain's capacity to generate vivid internal experiences that feel externally real, complicating distinctions between pathology and spirituality. Psychologists also debated the impact of social reinforcement and cultural expectations on the expression of such abilities, considering how community belief systems might shape an individual's self-perception and reported experiences. Paranormal researchers approached Thomas's narrative with a different set of assumptions and objectives. Viewing his case as a potential example of genuine mediumship or psychic sensitivity, they sought to validate his experiences through investigation and analysis. Using historical documentation alongside contemporary accounts of similar phenomena, these researchers explored the possibility of communication across the boundary between life and death. They examined patterns in Thomas's reported abilities, such as the accurate naming of deceased individuals and the perception of breath as a spiritual imprint, to argue for the existence of phenomena that defy current scientific explanation. However, they also acknowledged the difficulties inherent in studying such cases retrospectively, where evidence is often fragmentary and filtered through layers of interpretation. The intersection of these disciplinary perspectives generated lively debate, reflecting broader societal ambivalence toward the paranormal and the unknown. Thomas Gray's story became a case study in the challenges of integrating subjective experience with objective analysis. It highlighted the limits of empirical methods when confronted with phenomena that resist quantification, as well as the risks of uncritical credulity when dealing with extraordinary claims. The boy's narrative also found resonance within discussions about the relationship between mental health and spiritual experience. Thomas's sensitivity blurred conventional boundaries, suggesting that psychological and spiritual dimensions might be intertwined in complex ways. This intersection prompted reconsideration of diagnostic frameworks and raised ethical questions about how individuals with unusual sensory experiences should be understood and supported. The story underscored the importance of cultural context in shaping interpretations of mental states and the potential for spiritual experiences to be pathologized or dismissed. Public engagement with Thomas Gray's story mirrored these scholarly debates. Readers of Victorian newspapers, participants in spiritualist meetings, and visitors to the village all brought their own interpretations, influenced by personal beliefs and cultural narratives. The story's enduring appeal lies in its capacity to evoke wonder, skepticism, empathy, and inquiry simultaneously. It serves as a reminder of the human desire to find meaning in the face of death and the unknown, and the diverse ways communities negotiate that desire. Thomas's narrative has been employed in educational and research settings as a tool for exploring the complexities of belief, perception, and historical memory. It invites interdisciplinary dialogue, encouraging collaboration between historians, psychologists, theologians, and folklorists. Through this collaborative lens, the story becomes a rich site for examining how knowledge is constructed, contested, and transmitted across generations. Moreover, the case of Thomas Gray continues to inspire contemporary paranormal investigators and psychical researchers who see in his experiences a precursor to modern explorations of mediumship and extrasensory perception. His story provides historical grounding for ongoing efforts to understand phenomena that challenge materialist assumptions, encouraging a nuanced approach that respects both empirical rigor and the lived realities of those who report extraordinary encounters. In reflecting on the impact of Thomas's story, one observes its function as a bridge between disciplines and perspectives, a narrative that refuses simplistic categorization and instead invites ongoing inquiry. It challenges scholars and laypersons alike to grapple with the ambiguities inherent in human experience, especially when that experience touches the profound mysteries of life and death. Ultimately, the story of Thomas Gray stands as a testament to the enduring human fascination with the boundary between worlds. It compels us to consider how history, psychology, and belief intertwine to shape our understanding of phenomena that elude definitive explanation. As a case study, it illustrates the potent interplay of cultural context, individual experience, and communal meaning-making that defines our engagement with the supernatural. By engaging with Thomas Gray's narrative, we are invited to confront the limits of our knowledge and the depths of our curiosity. His story continues to resonate because it embodies the tension between doubt and faith, science and mystery, isolation and connection, a tension that lies at the heart of the human condition itself. The story of Thomas Gray, the boy who could hear the dead breathing, continues to challenge and inspire us, inviting reflection on the fragile boundaries of human perception and the mysteries that lie beyond. His narrative stands as a profound testament to our enduring fascination with the unknown and the ways in which belief, experience, and skepticism intertwine to shape our understanding of reality. Thomas's life and abilities compel us to reconsider the nature of perception itself, not merely as a passive receipt of sensory data, but as an active engagement with dimensions that may transcend ordinary experience. His sensitivity to the breath of the departed suggests that reality might be layered, with echoes of existence persisting beyond the confines of physical life. Such a perspective invites us to explore the possibility that the unseen world is not a distant abstraction, but an integral part of our lived experience, accessible through extraordinary means. The boy's story also urges us to acknowledge the human capacity for empathy and connection across divides often deemed insurmountable. Thomas's ability was, at its core, an expression of profound attunement to others, both living and dead, and a desire to bridge the gap left by loss and silence. His experiences remind us that the boundaries separating life from death, self from other, are permeable, and that compassion can transcend even the finality of mortality. Moreover, Thomas Gray's narrative highlights the complexities inherent in interpreting phenomena that challenge conventional frameworks. His story resists easy classification, embodying tensions between faith and reason, science and spirituality, isolation and community. It exemplifies the enduring struggle to comprehend experiences that lie at the intersection of the known and the mysterious, encouraging humility in the face of uncertainty. In inviting ongoing exploration, Thomas's tale beckons us to engage with forgotten histories and overlooked narratives that enrich our collective understanding of the supernatural and the human condition. It challenges us to listen closely, not only to the breath of the dead, but to the whispers of history, culture, and memory that shape our perceptions. As we reflect on Thomas Gray's extraordinary sensitivity, we are reminded that mysteries endure not merely because they evade explanation, but because they speak to fundamental aspects of existence that transcend empirical boundaries. His story encourages a continuous dialogue, a shared inquiry that honors both skepticism and wonder. By embracing such narratives, we open ourselves to a deeper appreciation of the complexities of perception, the multifaceted nature of reality, and the profound connections that bind us across time and space. Thomas Gray's legacy invites us to participate in an ever-unfolding exploration of life, death, and the spaces in between. In doing so, we affirm the human quest for meaning and understanding, a quest that embraces mystery not as a barrier, but as an invitation to expand the horizons of knowledge and empathy. The boy who could hear the dead breathing thus remains a luminous figure in the tapestry of history, a beacon guiding us toward the enduring enigma at the heart of our existence.